hoping.
Yeah, totally.
Well, thanks for sharing all. I think we have a little bit of a busy evening. We have some friends from Great Lakes, Audubon, Nat, and Isabella here to share a little bit about the Allouez Bay project that is getting planned for, and we're going to look forward to hearing from them. And then immediately afterward, those who are DAS members are invited to stick around for a brief annual meeting. And so, Nat, Isabella, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having us. I guess I'll hand it to Nat, really. He's our presenter for tonight, but I'll say that I really enjoyed visiting you. I met with Josh Bailey. This was at the beginning of last year in February, so it's really great to visit for the first time Duluth. It was definitely on my bucket list, and it didn't disappoint. So I'll hand it over to Nat without further ado for the presentation on the St. Louis Estuary project.
Thanks, Isabella, and thanks, Jeff. And thanks to all you folks at Duluth Audubon. I'm so excited to join you tonight, chatting with Jeff and a few of the board members.
Hand it over to Patrice Critchley-Menner, the chair of the board for the.
Oh, and was saying if I was going to be a move from where I live now and be an Audubon member anywhere, it would be in Duluth. You guys are in such an amazing place. I've visited a few times myself, and every time I hesitate to leave and come home. So when you're rattling off those places, you're seeing birds. I'm curious if any of you guys are regular visitors at Wisconsin Point or Allouez Bay in general. Nice. Anybody happen to be out there in the last couple of days?
I've just sort of been checking in with folks who've been out. I think around 10 or 11 species of warbler today on the point. But I think it's been kind of, like we've been saying, it's been a little slow sort of everywhere up here yet, with some things just sort of popping in outside of, the odd rare thing here and there. But yeah, I think it's been a fairly normal. It's been really nice to see, again, maybe this is tangential to this, but all of the nice sort of improvements that have been made to Wisconsin Point lately have really been really awesome. So kudos to those projects for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll chat a little bit about some of the upcoming stuff at Allouez Bay, but also want to just give you guys some background on Audubon Great Lakes, which is a regional field office of National Audubon Society, responsible for work in Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio. I'm the director of conservation there, and of course, Isabella's our chapter network engagement. And do you guys see my slides? Good.
We should be able to see that.
So across the Great Lakes region, got really amazing Audubon coverage and membership, as well as chapters, 42 chapters, 5 nature centers, and over 300,000 members. So really allows us to honestly say that the Audubon is local everywhere, because we have amazing groups of folks like you who care about birds and take action for them. Audubon Great Lakes, again, is kind of more geopolitical boundaries, responsible for work in these 5 states. We also have an office, Audubon, Minnesota, based out of the Twin Cities. Audubon's been around for over 100 years, right? So as a national organization, we reinvented ourselves several times. When I'm studying the history of Audubon, I like to see, though, that we've always been based on a grassroots approach of people that care for birds and the environment and take action, build a groundswell support to take change. Our work on the ground today looks a lot like this in terms of research on species like black tern, habitat management and prescribed fire and hydrological restoration, engagement, connecting people and especially urban communities to natural areas, and making meaningful policy action by taking trips to the Capitol and calling and working with our members to call their representatives to take action. Our Great Lakes work has really been around only for a few years. Really started planning around about 5 years ago, and we've really honed in on Great Lakes coastal wetlands as a needed conservation action and an opportunity to save birds and improve the Great Lakes coastal system. We've lost a lot of the coastal wetlands. Those that remain are in pretty poor condition, and we've seen dramatic declines in bird populations, especially marsh birds associated with that loss. One of the reasons we like this conservation targeting is because there's win-win. So we all know, especially those folks that live near the near the Great Lakes and live near rivers that go into the Great Lakes, we know that there's really a strong need for wetlands to protect us and create those ecosystem services that provide so many benefits to communities of people as well as birds. Marsh birds are great suite of species to focus on because they're that indicator species. They're not only on the kind of who's list of state wildlife action plans and threatened endangered species list, but they're also an indicator of quality functioning ecosystems. The best data set for this geography and the longest is really out of Birds Canada. Birds, previously known as Bird Studies Canada, is now Birds Canada. They've got the Marsh Monitoring Program. Some of you may know it. Surveys for birds as well as amphibians. And here's some of the trends you see from the last almost couple decades. Populations, common species even like Sora declining pretty significantly. American coot, species that uses the open water, dabbles like a duck, which is really a secretive marsh bird. A little more wet meadow, shallower marsh species like Virginia rail is actually one that was in a building collision in the city, but even known as a somewhat common species, really rapidly declining. Common gallinule, see signs of some stabilization in this population, decline, but still declining. Pied-billed grebe, you guys see the chick in this photo? I love this photo. We call the hell diver folks around Chicago called the pied-billed grebe. Really a great, somewhat like a diving duck, but also a secretive marsh bird. American bittern, somewhat of a stable trend, which is a good sign in the Great Lakes region. Marsh wren, the beautiful bubbly sounds of the marsh, and the tail, of course, perked wide up. Also stable trends. Least bittern. This is good to see that least bittern, after a period of pretty significant declines, is increasing. It's one of our few marsh birds that's increasing now in the region. So Audubon went on an effort to really understand where we could best work for marsh birds in this coastal wetland system. We went through a spatial prioritization or blueprint process that allowed us to direct not only our own resources, but also resources of our partners and our agency friends into conservation action on the ground. We really a 5-step process to develop this blueprint that was built on surveys conducted in the field, identifying these birds. Step 2, correcting for imperfect detection. So we do modeling to understand how the detectability of these birds during the survey. Then use a variety of remote sensing and other landscape scale variables to model, in step 4 there, to model the predicted abundance of these birds across the entire coastal wetland system of the Great Lakes. So even where we haven't done surveys, we can model out and estimate how much bird density we have. And then combine species and provide higher weights for species of higher conservation need to really understand this heat map of the highest priority areas. Here's just a look at that coastal wetland system. This is a map of all of the EPA delineated coastal wetlands. That's kind of where we started. We use monitoring conducted by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and the Coastal Wetland Monitoring Program. University of Minnesota Duluth is very involved in this program, especially around your area, of course. Here's the species we looked at. Quite a few I already showed. You guys see the bittern in the picture, right? And here's some of the environmental predictors. Proximity and proportion of open water, lake levels, proportion of invasive species like Phragmites. These are all the variables that predict how much birds we would have on the ground there. Then we built this, the model using a boosted regression tree analysis, which is a fancy way to say that we're predicting the occurrence across a landscape. And again, we can add in layers of highest ranking species and do that across each pixel in the entire landscape. It's really a pretty iterative process. And weight these species by their vulnerability to climate change, their status on state lists, and as well as regional like Fish and Wildlife Service lists. And here's the output. This has formed the blueprint of our Great Lakes Initiative strategy. These are basically the most important areas for marsh birds now. You see a really high importance for the southern UP of Michigan and the Straits of Mackinac and St. Mary's River area in general. In Lake Superior, it's St. Louis River Estuary and Chequamegon Bay and a few other handful of bays. Western Lake Erie, Saginaw Bay, and a few places on Eastern Lake Ontario especially. So when I present, this isn't just for you all. This is every time I present this, I start with, because I start west to east, number 1, St. Louis River Estuary. There it is up close. You can zoom in on these maps and really look at those priority wetlands as they're mapped out. There's Chequamegon Bay, Green Bay, of course. This is the Straits, but also just much more broadly, this is a really important area for marsh birds that we really didn't understand much about. Saginaw Bay. That's St. Clair Flats, one of the largest colonies of black terns in the entire Midwest. Western Lake Erie and Eastern Lake Ontario, there they are. This is interesting to look at that the wetlands with the most protection are in Lake Superior. Wetlands with the least protection are in Lake Ontario, and also a pretty significant amount of the top 20% of our coastal wetlands for marsh birds are in Lake Ontario. So really this kind of guides strategy a little bit. In Lake Ontario, we should be looking at creating more protected areas. Lake Superior, we should probably be looking at improving the quality of the existing core wetlands. Again, this forms our big plan. We had a media announcement maybe a month ago, really got a lot of attention, and we've set goals to restore almost half of the coastal wetlands that are remaining over a 10-year period, really by doing some of that work ourselves, but more importantly, working with partners and agencies like Minnesota DNR, Wisconsin DNR, Ducks Unlimited, the Nature Conservancy, Minnesota Land Trust is a great partner in your region. And here's how we kind of prioritize those regions for our goal setting. And here's where we got projects on the ground. And we just updated this to put an active dot on the map near Duluth. St. Louis River Estuary, priority region number 1, again, is west to east. You guys know a lot about more about the estuary than I do, but just a tremendous complex of backwater wetlands and in-stream wetlands, and really because of its location on the tip of the lake, incredible stopover habitat for migratory birds, raptors, of course, but all kinds of land birds. Really important for broad taxa and suites of species. Our goals here are to impact almost 20,000 acres. We think we can do about 3,000 of that ourselves, and 14,000 through informing partnerships where we're providing data or assisting with management plans, or getting folks like you to participate in community science. One of the areas on the map that really jumped out to us as high priority and through conversations with Wisconsin DNR is Allouez Bay. I say Allouez Bay sometimes, and I hear people say that, but I heard Jeff say Allouez, so I'll say Allouez Bay. You guys don't have to be told about this, at least Clinton doesn't, because I know he's gone out there now, but incredible stopover, of course, with the natural spit of Wisconsin Point. The bay itself, historically home to incredible diversity of in numbers of marsh birds. This was arguably one of, or the last place that black terns bred in a colony in the entire estuary. The last records of those were in the early 90s. I think 92, there was one pair that hung on. And plovers, and it's a opportunity to get plovers back now with a big project that some of you are probably familiar with to create a kind of ideal habitat for them. I've heard rumors that there may be a female checking out that site just in the last couple of days. That would be a massive success to get plovers breeding back on Wisconsin Point. American bittern was a species that the Natural Research Institute at University of Minnesota Duluth picked up in decent numbers, a couple of pairs in breeding pairs in Allouez Bay last year. Anybody know more about Allouez Bay they want to throw in the history? I love this map. This is referred to as the herding map. This is from, oh shoot, I think this is 1920 maybe. It's a long time ago. It was before much of the dredging in the harbor. And this shows emergent vegetation across the bay, which is really pretty abundant. This was pretty shallow water bay naturally, so it had a lot of emergent and submerged and floating aquatic vegetation, and thus really great for birds. Our goals at Allouez Bay are really to restore the habitat for marsh birds and perhaps black tern. We want to create conditions that would allow for black terns to return, but black tern numbers are declining pretty significantly across the region. You're seeing a ton of colony abandonment. So we would have to get lucky in some ways to get black terns back, but we will do everything we can. The work to restore the marsh and create more ideal emergent vegetation will deliver much more quickly for species like bitterns and rails and grebes, who are really kind of more if you build it, they will come, which is a great response to restoration on the ground. We're working with partners, Minnesota Land Trust, the city of Duluth, the city of Superior, in NRI to develop a framework for priority bird monitoring in the Wisconsin side of the St. Louis River Estuary. So a lot of work has happened in the Minnesota side to document bird numbers and establish monitoring, but we're going to now try and get that boosted up on Wisconsin to meet the match of Minnesota. Any Wisconsin folks on the phone? Can I make fun of Wisconsin since it's all Minnesota people on the phone, or vice versa? So, I think this is a really great opportunity for you all to get engaged. We've been talking a lot with NRI, and we're close to getting a kind of an agreement and a partnership underway with them, where they will incorporate community science into a lot of the surveying that they're doing. So we've been talking, and we've flirted the idea with Jeff already about a bio blitz. We're not quite organized yet enough yet to really present that to you, but we hope we will have opportunities for bio blitz and just regular surveys where you all can participate in not just marsh bird surveys, but really documenting more systematically birds across the suite of species. And then this is all happening under a project led by Minnesota Land Trust to develop a landscape conservation design for Allouez Bay. There's a lot more partners involved in that project. And there'll be stakeholder meetings coming up, and we'll make sure Isabella will probably be your point contact on that, but we'll make sure that you guys are all, of course, invited to those. There's a whole slew of partners who are helping with that, but they're really trying to design the future vision of Allouez Bay as a whole, not just for birds, but for fish and for what was the record? Ice racing, which I just learned about, that they actually race cars on Allouez Bay over winter. I was like, whoa, that sounds crazy, but cool. So getting stakeholder and input into this, what can we really create here? If we create good habitat conditions and clean up water, perhaps improve things for birds and people. So when we're doing this on the ground, we've really recognized the habitat associations between marsh birds and what we call hemimarsh, which means half marsh. And it's not just about having half emergent vegetation and half water. That's kind of what you start with. You want 50% of each but it's also about interspersion and having a lot of edge and patchiness and clumpiness. So most of these species that I was showing really depend on being able to nest in vegetation, but having access to shallow and deep water in places to fish or to eat. And so we're really looking to create a good diversity of shallow emergent vegetation, deeper water, open areas with more open water, and then like the bitterns and the gallinule are kind of right in the middle. Like they want about 50-50 structural emergent veg and open water that they can really use. And if you can create that, then you can get breeding birds back very quickly. Some of the early planning stuff we've done is working with drone imagery to map out the current interspersion, we call it. There's a scientific way to calculate how much edge you have and how the birds can use that. So here we've classified from image open water in blue, mud flats in brown, floating veg there in purple, and then the big emergent veg in green, which some of it is dominated by cattail, which can get too thick and invasive, and then birds don't use it. But some of this habitat is still in pretty good condition. But if you remember the herding map, you can see there's a lot of open water here now. And we've had high water, of course, right? But there's a lot less emergent vegetation overall in Allouez Bay than there was 100 years ago. And here you can just zoom in and see this is where Bear Creek empties into Allouez Bay. That's our classification. And then zoomed in even more. And you can see the purple is actually like floating veg, like lily pads, lotus, and that we can pick up from the aerial image, and the computer can recognize that and map it for us. We'll be able to see how those conditions change, and we'll be able to document breeding bird numbers as well, so we can see if we're getting a response for our management action on the ground. Then I'd leave it with our request to you, and just a reminder and a thank you to you for really being the engine that drives Audubon, even nationally. You know, you may think you're disconnected from National Audubon, but there is no National Audubon without Duluth Audubon and without all of you members. So we want you to get engaged. We'd love to talk more about the project. I'd be happy to have individual conversations. I want to come visit as soon as I can get clearance to travel for safety. And is actually, you guys will like this, that was the last trip I took, was to the St. Louis River Summit was it February or March? And then I got home and then COVID broke out and they're like, no more traveling. so maybe it'll be the next place I go to once we can start traveling again, which sounds like it's soon. But we hope you can take part in the planning and the work here on the ground, not just at Allouez Bay, but in a broader sense across Duluth and Superior and all the great places around the St. Louis River Estuary. And we hope you can bring people out and connect people to the great places that birds need. I know you guys are already doing that. I can tell from the chatter as the meeting opened up. And then, you know, I think there's a ton of opportunity. Isabella works much more closely than I do with our policy team. Our policy team is rapidly growing. We're making a big difference on the policies that matter for birds. And if you have a liking and a tendency to enjoy engaging with people and presenting and talking or leading bird walks with elected officials, we'd love to support those efforts and see where our policy priorities can overlap with yours. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is one of our biggest policy pushes. We see it doing amazing things for birds, and we see it really just getting started. It's 10 years in. We want it to go another 100 years. So a lot of work to do still to clean up areas of concern, like the St. Louis River Estuary, but even after areas of concern, to continue to create great places on the ground. And Recovering America's Wildlife Act is one that maybe some of you are familiar with, but it has the potential to completely change the way we think about nature conservation in this country. It would supply an incredible amount of funding to state agencies like Minnesota DNR to undertake work on species that are not game species. Much of the funding for Actually, Minnesota has a really good funding system already, but many of the Midwest states have a lot of their funding only directed to game species. So that would really make a tremendous difference for being able to focus on species like marsh birds and warblers and aerial insectivores, which we know are in big trouble. So that's how you can help. And that's all I had for you, Jeff and everybody. I'd be happy to open up for questions or just chat or hear stories about Allouez Bay or ideas. Here's some of the names of the people that worked on our spatial prioritization and many of our partners who contributed data and who we're still working with. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments? Or stories?
I like stories.
This is Allouez. You know, we've been hearing rumors about getting out there with kayaks and canoes. Is that a organized event, or just everybody should do it, or what?
You know, the best idea is start right here. Let's organize an event. You know, I think, yeah, so, you know, I've alluded to, and we probably started talking with Jeff too early about it, getting hopes up for a bio blitz, which is not organized yet, but I hope we will have one in the summer and the fall. We have to coordinate closely with NRI, and they are great partners, Alexis Grindy and Annie Bracey, probably you guys know some of them, but and there's also, Isabella, I might have to correct me on this, is it the Friends of the Lake Superior Reserve, who are very interested in doing events. They've done cleanup events recently. They just did one on Earth Day at Wisconsin Point. We're having conversations with them, and they're very interested in getting some bird expertise support on their events. So if any of you are interested in being connected with them, then we'd love to do that, and we can loop you guys in when they're planning events. But Allouez, I'd say yes to just getting out there, but also like it'd be cool if you guys organize something. I've never been in the water. I've only seen the marsh from the roadside and kind of stepping in as far as I could, but it's such a rich marsh. It would really be best to explore by watercraft.
Well, we'll see.
Anybody else?
I'll quickly just share that I posted in my email in the chat, so that if you'd like to reach out to me or have questions, please do so. And then Nat also mentioned that we have our Audubon vision for the Great Lakes, and I also shared that link if you'd like to read the whole plan yourself. Again, it includes all of the 12 priority areas in addition to the St. Louis Estuary.
Well, thank you for the work that you do on our behalf, but also for the work that you're doing on behalf of the wildlife and the birds of that area. It's important and brings a lot of good into the world. Keep us informed of how we might further partner with you guys other than just getting out on our own organizing trips. And we do look forward to hearing more from NRI about the BioBlitz as well. So we do have some interest in getting involved in that.
That's fantastic.
Great, thank you so much for having us tonight. And thanks, Nat, for presenting.
My pleasure. Great to meet you all. Hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Indeed.
Likewise.
Come on up.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for those who are Duluth